Hello and welcome to Culture Over Coffee, a podcast focused on improving company culture and fostering employee engagement. Every week we chat with experts and thought leaders about the latest information and proven practices you can use to reduce regrettable turnover, increase productivity on your team, and retain key customers. So pour a cup of your favorite brew and join us. I'm your host, Beth Sunshine, SVP at Up Your Culture and the Center for Sales Strategy. In this episode, we're taking a look at why psychological safety is a crucial component in all organizations, especially those known for taking risks in pursuit of innovation. And here to help us break it all down is Adrienne Wilkerson, co-founder and CEO at Beacon Media and Marketing. Adrienne makes a ton of amazing points like why you can't have true innovation without psychological safety, how being willing to innovate means owning our mistakes from the top down, and finally, why you and your team should celebrate both the wins and what you learn from the losses. Well, hi, Adrienne, and welcome to Culture Over Coffee. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I've been really looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be great. You founded Beacon Media and Marketing, I think 12 years ago. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, 2012.
Yeah. And you wrote an article a few weeks ago about company culture. Our producer, Brent, actually read it and flagged it and was like, you have to speak to her. You shared the ins and outs of your experience founding your company. And I really enjoyed reading it. I was glad you shared it with me. You talked about the pros and cons. You shared your thinking on a lot of things, one of which was the topic of psychological safety. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Amy Edmondson. I've worked closely with a lot of organizations to apply the principles that she teaches to drive innovation and deal with conflict and create thriving, high-functioning teams. You live this every day. And you even talk about it. You have a podcast yourself, right?
I do. Yes. The Beacon Way.
Yeah. And I noticed you talk about subjects like this from time to time on the Beacon Way. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts today. Thank you again for joining. You ready to jump into some questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So we're going to start with just a very high level. How would you define psychological safety, especially in the context of high-risk innovation environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say for us at Beacon, psychological safety really means that the leadership teams hold space, if you will, for the leadership team themselves, but for everybody to be able to feel confident and that they can share their ideas. We kind of jokingly say we don't promise to implement everything, but we do promise to listen to everything. And so that's kind of one of the catchphrases that we use around here at Beacon quite a bit. But really it's that almost innate knowledge and just feeling that I can say what I need to say and I'm not going to get slammed for it. I can make a mistake and know that I've got this space to learn from it. And so it's that kind of removing that fear that kind of lives in the back of somebody's head that, oh man, if I raise my hand, I'm going to get shut down. So for us, that's really how it kind of translates into our company culture.
I love that. I love your catchphrase. I've heard before, while everyone may not necessarily have a vote, everyone most definitely has a voice. It reminds me a lot of what you're saying. Well, that's really nice. So kind of peeling the next layer of the onion, why is psychological safety crucial for teams working in those high stakes, fast paced, really innovative spaces? And kind of a part B, what are the main barriers to establishing it in a culture when there is that kind of a vibe in the office?
Yeah. Now that's a fantastic question. I think it's especially important in our culture because, we work in the digital marketing space. things are so constantly changing. You know, the adage, nothing is so constant as change, manifests itself on a daily basis. My co-founder and I, we used to jokingly say, it'd be nice if something just didn't change for a week. Just 1 week. It'd be great if something didn't change for 1 week. I'm not sure we've hit that benchmark yet. So yeah, so it's constantly changing. So if there's not that space for people to voice their opinion, we're moving so fast that becomes incredibly important for everybody to be able to raise their hand and feel confident saying something. So in my opinion, you can't have innovation, true risk taking without this concept of psychological safety. And I think it's existed in some businesses for a very long time. We just didn't have a name for it, you know, so now we have a name for it, thanks to Amy, which I really appreciate. But that, you know, we really depend on everybody on our team, from the person who just started yesterday and is, you know, proverbially working in the mailroom, to the people that have been here forever and our directors, because you never know where that next amazing idea is going to come from. And we tend to open our brainstorms up to anybody in the company. If they're ahead on their work, or they're caught up and they want to pop into a random brainstorm, it doesn't matter if it's our bookkeeper, or the account manager on the account. We love having everybody there, because again, you just never know where that crazy idea is going to come from. That's going to be the next big thing. So even that gesture of inviting everybody and having that version of an open door policy, I think communicates that message of, this is a place where you can come and bring your ideas. And I always tell people, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. The only dumb idea is the one you don't voice. And so that we really encourage that. We'll laugh at each other. We really don't take ourselves seriously here. I think that's actually a big part of psychological safety, where you can laugh at yourself. You have that level of self-awareness. And I think one of the big things that people struggle with is that this is not as common as I wish it was in business, especially corporate America. So often we see employees coming in from a much more rigid corporate structure, wherever that was for them. And it's like, they want to do this at first. It's like, maybe they're not going to bite my head off if I raise my hand. And so when we get somebody new that's coming in, that's onboarding, we really encourage the rest of the team, be a little more demonstrative about raising your hand, throwing out a crazy idea in brainstorm or in one of our huddles, because people have to see it to believe it, especially if they've been in an environment where they've been shut down a lot. It's just, they have that habit instead of the habit of feeling confident that they can raise their hand. And it's a process for people coming in. So we talk about it a lot here. We talk about it in a lot of our all hands huddles. We talk about what makes people feel safe versus not. We talk about different communication styles, because that's often what we find shuts other people down, is they don't realize they're communicating in an opposite style. And so somebody who's a very demonstrative communicator is very aggressive, if you will, or just, which is usually me, a very, outspoken, I've got an idea. So you've got those, and then you've got the people that are over there like, oh, I've got a really good idea. But, they go to volunteer and somebody else jumps in, and they're like, okay, and so we talk about different communication styles and how that really demonstrative communication style can shut down people that are not as demonstrative, that are maybe more comfortable doing things in the background. And so we talk about recognizing that we need to call specific people out if they're not participating. And it might be because they just don't have anything to contribute, which is okay. Maybe they're just listening that day, or maybe they really want to raise their hand, but they're not the kind of person to just force their opinion into the noise of everybody brainstorming and talking back and forth. So we really train and encourage team leads to keep an eye out for somebody that maybe hasn't gotten a chance to say something, and just at least make sure everybody has the chance to say something. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody wants to or can contribute, but at least we hold space for that, if you will.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it is really interesting to hear you talk about the different communication styles and how, when you envision psychological safety, you envision this utopia where everyone feels comfortable raising their hand and shouting things out. But you still do have people who are analytical by nature. They need to process.
Right.
They're going to come up with their best ideas an hour after the brainstorm. Or you have the people who, want to, just wait till the right moment to share it. They're not quite as bold. So that's a really interesting twist on psychological safety and just reading the room. I like the way you've included your leaders to help, make that happen. You talked a bit about, gosh, you shared quite a few strategies you use actually for getting people to feel comfortable opening up, especially when they come from a place where that's not the norm. What about when people make mistakes? Have you ever had to tackle that? Someone who made a mistake, doesn't feel comfortable sharing it. Maybe they give a little bit, not a lot of it, so that you still don't have that full transparency, that full communication, even if there's good intent.
Right.
Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that one's always a challenging line to walk, I feel like, as a leader, because you do want to encourage people to make mistakes, because you won't innovate if you don't make mistakes. If you're afraid to try something, afraid to take a risk, you're never going to be an innovative company. So a lot of what we talk about around here is we are an entrepreneurial organization. We continue to almost live as a startup, if you will, as an entrepreneurial style organization. And we've really embraced that. And so we talk a lot about what that means for Beacon, which what that really means for us is that we're constantly challenging ourselves. So one of our our number one value is that excellence is a goal we never stop striving for, because you'll never arrive. You'll always have a next level to strive to. And so we talk a lot about, you're going to have to fail when you try something new. You got to be brave enough and have the courage enough to fail at something and look kind of dumb doing it, to ever be able to innovate. And we talk about the courage that it takes to be creative. That's stepping out into something new. And so the fact that we try to include that in a lot of, just like we talk about it every quarter at every meeting, we go through our values. We talk about what they mean to each one of us, how those manifest in our lives, in our daily work environment. So we try to keep the conversation alive around that and why we're an entrepreneurial organization. When Jennifer and I merged businesses in 2012, we launched the first digital marketing agency in Alaska. There were some amazing people doing bits and pieces, but nobody had really brought it together into a full inbound was the term at the time, but inbound or digital marketing agency. So we were those disruptors. We were those early adapters. And that is something we've made a very intentional effort to preserve in our culture, that we're always willing to innovate. And really what that means is, from the top down, we as leaders, we have to be willing to own our mistakes. And it starts with us. So we can say that we're a transparent company all you want. We can say it's okay to make a mistake all you want. But until I, as the CEO, screw up something and own it in front of the entire team, most of the time people are like, oh yeah, I made a mistake over here. But hey, if the CEO can come out, like I messed up really bad a couple of weeks ago. We do this thing with our team. So every other week we do a day in the life, because we're a very remote team. We're in 17 states across the country. So we have to be very creative with how do we pull everybody together? How do we help everybody feel psychologically safe when we're spread out everywhere? So one of the things we do is a day in the life. So everybody gets about 15 minutes every other week, and they get to do a short little PowerPoint on a day in their life, kind of a thing. So it was my week to do it. I had my presentation already, and they had already been giggling at me because I had been a week ahead and I had done it. So I had my presentation done a week ahead. And then it wasn't that time. So I've got so many things going on my calendar. I get very mixed up sometimes on the calendar. And my executive assistant had even reminded me. So the week comes around. Finally, it's my turn to do it. And my watch dies. And I'm in a meeting offsite and I'm just chatting away. Everything's great. I'm done with the meeting. I check in with my EA and she's like, where have you been? I've been messaging you. I've been calling you. Well, I had my phone on silent in my purse while I'm here in this meeting trying to be present. Total royal oops in front of everybody. So yeah. So the next week they all got to laugh at me and giggle. And I, got to own that I totally missed it, and I let them down and I didn't show up. And thankfully somebody else had their presentation and ready and they were able to cover for me, which was very gracious of them. But when things like that happen, I feel like those are golden opportunities for us as leadership to laugh at ourselves, not take ourselves seriously, and just go, yeah, I messed up. I apologize. I let you guys down. You're all sitting here wondering where the heck the boss is. So those are golden opportunities that don't cause really any harm. Like we didn't miss a deadline for a client. We didn't, mess up on something. So those are almost good opportunities to make a bigger deal out of it and to own what happened and, give everybody permission to hold me accountable next time or whatever it is. And, make a joke out of it. And cause that time you could. Now the ones that are really hard are when somebody messes up and costs, and we lose a client over it, or we end up having to refund hundreds or thousands of dollars because of some screw up that happened. Mm-hmm. And those I think are a lot more sensitive to walk through with your team. How do you, acknowledge the mistake? You can't let it off the hook because there's consequences we all have to walk through, but at the same time, if we shut them down and we rake them over the coals, that goes contrary to our culture of mistakes are where we learn. And so there's a saying that I use around a lot, and I'm like, the mistake is not the problem. Not learning from the mistake is the problem. Mm-hmm. And so we take our team through kind of a 3-step debrief when something that significant happens, when it's a mistake that there's serious consequences to. Making light of it is not healthy for the client, for us, for the employee. So we use the Navy SEAL kind of system where we talk about, okay, what went right? What went wrong? And what can we learn from that that's repeatable for the future? Was this just a one-off and it was totally out of left field and something fluky happened? Or is this something that there's something we can learn as a repeatable pattern to make it better next time? So that's kind of how we address those more serious topics. And that's kind of happened by a lot of trial and error, because I really was struggling with how do you still give people permission to make mistakes and work through them and learn from them when they really hurt the company or hurt a client or hurt another employee. Something that they did has major consequences. So far, that's kind of our best path we've found through that, but kind of an example of 2 different mistakes and how we kind of deal with them.
2 great examples. I like the way, you can't make light of a situation that is so heavy, but yet when you debrief and break it down, you're still starting with what went well. So you're acknowledging the good work and then zeroing in on what went wrong and walking away with takeaways. I think that would make me much more comfortable in the future with mistakes. And I see a trend in what you're sharing. Twice now, you've given an example of a leader modeling what
Mm-hmm.
psychological safety looks like. So, when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to raising your hand, raise it demonstratively, like really put yourself out there. Let's set the stage that way. And
Mm-hmm.
kind of putting yourself on the line, being vulnerable with the fact that you had the time wrong. I think that, the way you're modeling it from, your level in the organization through your leaders is a really interesting way to, create psychological safety and certainly demonstrate
Mm-hmm.
the importance of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great stories. Thank you for sharing. So, kind of zeroing in a little bit more and looking at the flip side, we're talking about how to create psychological safety and why it's so important, specifically when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to innovation. But let's look at the underbelly of that and consider what impact what impact do we see when psychological safety is not present? What
Mm-hmm.
happens to employee creativity? What
Mm-hmm.
happens to employee engagement when there's a vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
and no psychological safety or very little? What would you
Right.
imagine would happen?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have to imagine very hard. We have had periods in our history where our culture's been toxic and there really hasn't been psychological safety. And, I remember Jennifer and I felt like we kind of woke up one day and we looked around our company. It's like, wait, what happened? This is not the company we wanted. This is not the culture we wanted to create. And it was actually really brutal because we were just like, we wanted a company we wanted to show up and work at every day and hope to bring in people who were like, felt that way too. And all of a
Yeah,
sudden we're like, we don't want to show up to work, much less ask anybody else to. So for us, the journey through that was Jennifer and I, as the two founders, and we were working founders, still are. She's my chief marketing officer now, and I'm the CEO. We really had to take a hard look at ourselves first. What are we not doing that is causing this toxic work environment, that's causing a lack of psychological safety? And so there was a lot to that, but that's where we had to start. What are we missing? What did we allow into the company that's created this? And so for us, the journey was we had kind of taken our hands off some of the cultural pieces of the company. We thought we had hired some people in that had the same values and opinions as us, and that wasn't quite the case. I'm not even going to say theirs were wrong, but it was not a good combination of their things and how we really wanted to create the company. So, when we had to own that, we're the ones that hired them. We're the ones that gave them this authority and kind of went hands off a little bit.
yeah,
So that was on us. And so the big piece for us is that Jennifer and I both chose to get much more involved in the company culture. And we really that's when our values really started to come
mm,
about. We really sat down and what is meaningful for us? What kind of company do we want to work in? And what are we against company culture wise? And that's a strong phrase, but I believe it's as important as discussing what you're for in a company culture is what are we not going to tolerate? And I read a quote one time that your company culture is defined by what you allow in your
yeah,
company.
that's right.
And we really had to take a look at what are we allowing in the company. So the result of all that was we have an amazing culture now, but it was very hard one. And I feel like I'm very confident in saying we have a good culture because I know what the bad is too. So one of the things we spent a lot of time defining for ourselves and discussing with the team was this concept of constructive conflict. So one of the things that happened in our company when the culture went really sour is people did not feel like it was a safe enough environment to share their thoughts. So there was no psychological safety. So everything went underground or underwater, if you will. So it
Mhm.
looked calm on the top, but there was all kinds of nastiness going on underneath. People weren't sharing their ideas or their concerns. with the leadership. They were sharing them with each other, and they was kind of allowing it to fester and keep, because no solutions were coming forward. Everybody felt trapped, including us. And so we started getting everybody together. We're like, okay, no more of this side conversations, under the surface conversations. We're going to take a bold step. We're going to call it out and bring it all forward. And we're going to engage with what we call constructive conflict. And Simon Sinek talks quite a bit about this, the idea that we can have conflict in our culture and it can be a good thing. And this is not a popular concept in our culture in the US. People tend to avoid conflict. So training people on how to have constructive conflict and how to disagree respectfully, with each other, has been quite a process.
Yeah.
But that combined with us as leaders, again, taking ownership that, hey guys, we really messed up and we really want to clean this up. And what are you guys seeing that is not making you feel safe? Like we think we know from the top, if you will, but like, what are you guys seeing? And it took a lot of encouragement before people were ready to share, because they saw us, Jennifer and I, as condoning this toxic work culture, which effectively we were. That wasn't what we wanted, but by allowing it to happen, we were condoning it. And so the team assumed, rightfully so, that, Jennifer and I were all good with it, because how could you not assume that if it's happening right under your nose? So we had to call it out that was not okay. And so that put us in direct conflict with some of the team leads that we had hired in. So we had to have conversations with them as to what was okay and what was not okay behavior wise. And we had to hold ourselves accountable and them to kind of a standard of communication, standard of working together, standard of respect. And, Jennifer and I, so it was really a heavy lift at first, of just going, constantly in meetings, like, that's not okay. We're going to stop the meeting right now. That's not okay. We're going to shift. What is okay in this situation? And so we talked through that, and we would shut down people that were, and I that sounds harsh, but the people that were kind of dominating the conversations and dominating, and they were often the more toxic ones. It was almost this stepping in as leadership and going, no, this is okay. This is how we communicate. This is how we operate. Everything outside of this is not okay. So if you want to stay at Beacon, this is how we get to communicate here. If you don't want to communicate like that, we're not going to judge you, but Beacon's probably not a good place for you.
Right.
And so that was kind of the message that we just had to hammer all the time. And it was a bit exhausting. It was just like, you had to be on point in every meeting, looking for that stuff. In every conversation, you were kind of on guard a little bit, because we just couldn't relax back into that toxicity, if you will. So some people shifted their attitude, shifted how they communicated with their coworkers, and they're still here today. Some, they chose not to continue to be part of Beacon. So, the ones that chose to shift, I think they were thrilled to find that this, didn't have to be like this here. And the others, they found somewhere else that they were more comfortable. And, some of them I'm still in communication with today, and they're doing great, kind of a thing. So it just kind of depends. But that was a little bit of our journey through a good culture that went really sideways. And thankfully we were able to, to bring it back. And the team was a big part of that. If they hadn't, had enough grace with us to allow us the space for us to own it, and us being Jennifer and I, and really to start shifting things, they could have just said, yeah, whatever. You guys are already clearly don't believe, you're not walking what you're preaching here. So, we're out of here. So I really give the team a lot of credit for choosing to have that kind of grace with us and walk through us shifting the whole company culture.
There's so much to learn from what you shared. I wish we had hours to unpack that, because You're exactly right. Your culture is what you tolerate. And that's a very hard thing for
Hmm.
executives to typically wrap their minds around because
Right.
they're not often in the minutia, in the weeds of things,
Right.
but they get whiffs of it, and
Yes.
so it's hard. When do I, do a stop down? When do I just,
Hmm.
that's one thing, and I just, we've got to keep moving. It's a tough thing. So for you to do that complete stop down was really interesting and valuable, I think, for everyone to hear. I also love the connection you made between constructive conflict and psychological safety,
Mm.
because you're right. I think human nature for many people is to avoid conflict. For many
Sure.
other people, it is, go along to get along. So you get
Yes.
a lot of yes men or yes women
Hmm.
on your
Sure.
team who have reservations, but they're not telling you. And
Right.
conflict is so healthy when it's
It
done well.
really
And so I
is.
appreciate you, kind of just bringing that to light. I think it'll give people a lot to think about.
Awesome.
All
Yeah,
right, so go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, that was a concept we really took home from Five Dysfunctions of a Team by
Yes,
Patrick
I
Leone.
love, yeah.
Oh, I hope I said his last name right. I always butcher it.
Lencioni, yeah,
Lynn, thank you.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So, but it was something that I felt like, again, we kind of wanted to do, but didn't have like a term kind of a thing for it. And so his Five Dysfunction of the Team was really helpful for us. Yeah. And to realize that constructive conflict doesn't always have to lead to 100% agreement, but
right.
100% consensus that this is how we're moving forward.
That's right.
And that has really enabled us to be able to move quickly and
Mhm.
implement innovative ideas quickly when we don't necessarily have to have 100% agreement. But so long as everybody's heard, people can
Right.
usually move forward with, sure, okay, we all
Yeah,
got to hear, and I kind of get what they're saying. I don't agree, but we'll give it a try. We'll give it a
right,
good try. And we
right,
might come back to their idea, we might not. So,
right.
yeah,
You
that
valued
was,
their voice. You showed them they were important. You truly listened. That is, I think that
mhm,
is what people really, really crave the most. So I
definitely.
have one last question.
Okay.
And that is, I always laugh because it's a small question, but it's such a big question. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who want to build a culture that encourages both risk taking, innovation, all of that
Yeah.
good stuff that comes with growth, but also psychological safety,
Hmm.
what would that piece of advice be?
Well, we've kind of mentioned it a couple of times throughout, but it would be that it has to start with you as a leader.
Mm,
And you really have to create psychological safety before you can expect innovation and risk taking from your team.
mm,
And so you have to make that choice in your own heart and have enough self awareness to know that you're going to basically be exposed a lot, if that makes sense. Like you are going to be the flashlight, the spotlight is going to be on you as the
mm,
leader. And when you're willing to choose to step into that spotlight and to lead by example, the rest will follow organically. It might not follow fast, but it'll follow organically
mm.
if you as a leader choose to be truly transparent. It can't be fake. Everybody
Right.
picks up on that really fast, you
Yes.
know. It's got to be true transparency, true owning the wins and the losses and celebrating the both in some ways, celebrating the wins and celebrating what we lose or learn from the losses.
Mm,
And when we start there, that will organically build this thing of this concept of psychological safety. And when your team starts to feel safe about their wins and their losses and knows that they can learn from those and become better, then this whole innovation and risk taking organically follows. And
mm.
but it's really hard to ask your team or push your team into being risk takers and innovators if you haven't created that psychological safety first.
The comfort.
So yes, so it has to start with you as a leader. You have to organically do that. And the thing that I tell a lot of leaders, especially young leaders that I'm mentoring and whatnot, it's like, don't force it. It will happen if you're true to yourself and are truly transparent first. But if you try to force it, it comes across as fake. It just does. And so like I tell, don't stress. It's going to happen if you show up as your true authentic self and you're open and honest with your communication. You own your losses, you own your wins, and you're transparent. And I know that's scary for a lot of leaders because they're like, I got to act like I know everything and I got to act like I always have the answers. And in fact, it's exact opposite.
Yeah.
Own that you don't have the answers, ask for help with the answers, and just show that you're human.
Yeah.
And the rest really organically follows. It's not a complicated formula, but it takes courage and it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. You've taught a class on leadership today. There's just so much wisdom in what you shared. And I want to thank you for taking the time to talk about culture and psychological safety and answer my questions. You shared so much good information. I think our listeners will find all of this very valuable. They're going to be pulling up Amy Edmondson and Simon Sinek and Patrick Lencioni and you and wanting to learn more. But for those listening, I am going to drop, if it's okay with you, I'll drop your LinkedIn information in the show notes. I imagine there will be a lot of people who want to connect with you, keep the conversation going. I'm also, for our listeners, I'm going to add a link that you can use to grade your company culture. And there is a segment on psychological safety in there. So it's an interactive quiz. It only takes a few minutes, but it'll give you a good sense of your company's current health of your culture, and it'll make some simple recommendations that may help. So thank you, Adrienne, for joining me today. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much for spending time with us on Culture Over Coffee. If you've enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and join us for every episode. For more helpful information on the topics of company culture and employee engagement, visit us at upyourculture.com.